Hello. Welcome back. Welcome back. I can't tell when it starts. If you can see what I see when it goes live in the webcam, like there's like 3 different points that might be the starting point. I could just wait until I'm clear of all of them, I guess. Welcome back to the channel house. The house of Tom Bombadil actually is where we are. This didn't work last night, the part where I tried to read this part. We're gonna try again. I even cut and pasted my offhandedly written description of the point in the action where we're at. Thanks for being here. I am, of course, your host and reader, Rogan Marshall. I'm called Roganautica because Joe Rogan's dog. I've discussed it a lot around here. It's in the stuff you gotta pay to see. The members only videos. Yes. Thanks for being here. I'm gonna come in close. I'm gonna pull the chair in close, and we're going to engage in a little reading together. A little bedtime reading together. Hey, Gandalf. That last live was... Yeah, it used to get like that a lot for a while. I don't like the energy and that actually, that there was a stretch where that was typical. There was a stretch last year where that was typical, but I would be going at like 2 in the morning when it got like that. I mean, it is kind of late. I'm a little cross-eyed. I didn't get much sleep last night. I spent like 4 hours today running around chasing leads on apartments, and Dave got out his trombone. So I mean, I guess I'm gonna push forward. I suggested that Dave should play some loud music that would go with Lord of the Rings before I walked in here. I mean, if you're determined to be disruptive, at least. Yes. Some of those there sounded like foreign government trolls. In the chat in the last one, yeah. Gandalf, were you there when I like invited them in? When I was like, if I mention the I word and the T word and something else, there's gonna be, yeah. I think they're like the Israelis and Russians are paying Pakistanis and Indians with really good English to pretend to be American for like $1 a post. You start discussing certain political content, they come in. It seems like it. It really seems like it. Like after a while, you can see clearly the difference between people who are genuinely committed to weird political chicanery and people who are just parroting a line. Like, and then and kids who are trolling, like there's like a lot of this stuff about being Nazis and like Hitler was right and whatever, like that is clearly just 13-year-olds and 17-year-olds. Like it's the exact same antisocial impulse as like the one punk rock kid who would wear swastika stuff. That like they're real kids. They're not foreign bots, but I think there are. Like, you know, they're not bots, but I think they're just paid to pretend to be Americans. All right, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna read. We are in the house. The four hobbits just arrived here, rescued from the hobbit eating willow tree by the magical sort of pseudo fantastic character Tom Bombadil. And they're spending the night at the home of Tom Bombadil and his woman Goldberry, the river's daughter. In the dead night, Frodo lay in a dream without light. Then he saw the young moon rising. Under its thin light there loomed before him a black wall of rock, pierced by a dark arch like a great gate. It seemed to Frodo that he was lifted up. And passing over, he saw that the rock wall was a circle of hills, and that within it was a plain, and in the midst of the plain stood a pinnacle of stone, like a vast tower, but not made by hands. On its top stood the figure of a man. The moon, as it rose, seemed to hang for a moment above his head and glistened in his white hair as the wind stirred it. Up from the dark plain below came the crying of fell voices and the howling of many wolves. Suddenly a shadow, like the shape of great wings, passed across the moon. The figure lifted his arms and a light flashed from the staff that he wielded. A mighty eagle swept down and bore him away. The voices wailed and the wolves yammered. There was a noise like a strong wind blowing, and on it was borne the sound of hoofs galloping, galloping, galloping from the east. Black riders, thought Frodo as he wakened, with the sound of the hoofs still echoing in his mind. He wondered if he would ever again have the courage to leave the safety of these stone walls. He lay motionless, still listening, but all was now silent, and at last he turned and fell asleep again or wandered into some other unremembered dream. At his side, Pippin lay dreaming pleasantly, but a change came over his dreams, and he turned and groaned. Suddenly he woke, or thought, and yet still heard in the darkness the sound that had disturbed his dream. Tip-tap, squeak. The noise was like branches fretting in the wind, twig fingers scraping wall and window, creak, creak, creak. He wondered if there were willow trees close to the house, and then suddenly he had a dreadful feeling that he was not in an ordinary house at all, but inside the willow and listening to that horrible dry creaking voice laughing at him again. He sat up and felt the soft pillows yield to his hands, and he lay down again relieved. He seemed to hear the echo of words in his ears. Fear nothing. Have peace until the morning. Heed no nightly noises. Then he went to sleep again. It was the sound of water that Merry heard falling into his quiet sleep, water streaming down gently and then spreading irresistibly all round the house into a dark, shoreless pool. It gurgled under the walls and was rising slowly but surely. I shall be drowned, he thought. It will find its own. He felt that he was lying in a soft, slimy bog. Springing up, he set his foot on the corner of a cold, hard flagstone. Then he remembered where he was and lay down again. He seemed to hear or remember hearing. Nothing passes doors or windows save moonlight and starlight and the wind off the hilltop. A little breath of sweet air moved the curtain. He breathed deep and fell asleep again. As far as he could remember, Sam slept through the night in deep content, if logs are contented. You know what's weird? There's a really similar passage in Titus Groan by Mervyn Peake, which was written around the same time, has a similar literary reputation, that goes through like the thoughts of all the characters sitting at a banquet table right before like a ceremonial meal. There must be a model, actually. Like if that's the case, they both are ripping it from something earlier. It's also worth pointing out right here while I'm interrupting that the reason that Tolkien, when he does horror type stuff, also C.S. Lewis, when he has horror like moments, the reason that they seem very Lovecraftian, even though Lovecraft and his crowd and the Inklings did not have any interconnections of any kind, they probably never read each other, is because they all read the same 20 or 30 classic fantasy and horror writers. They all had the same core influences. It's like the reason a punk rock band in 1979 in California might sound like one in New Jersey when neither of them had recorded a record. But like they were all into Algernon Blackwood. They were all into Arthur Machen. George MacDonald is a huge influence on this part of Lord of the Rings and Narnia stories also. Um, the name of the book you were trying to remember last week is Oliver Twist, the book that made Charles Dickens rich. They woke up all four at once in the morning light. Tom was moving about the room, whistling like a starling. When he heard them stir, he clapped his hands and cried, "Hey, come, merry doll, dairy doll, my hearties." He drew back the yellow curtains, and the hobbits saw that these had covered the windows at either end of the room, one looking east and the other looking west. They leapt up, refreshed. Frodo ran to the eastern window and found himself looking into a kitchen garden gray with dew. He had half expected to see turf right up to the walls, turf all pocked with hoof prints. Actually, his view was screened by a tall line of beans on poles. On them, the gray top of the hill loomed up against the sunrise. It was a pale morning. In the east, behind long clouds like lines of soiled wool stained red at the edges, lay glimmering deeps of yellow. The sky spoke of rain to come, but the light was broadening quickly, and the red flowers on the beans began to glow against the wet green leaves. Pippin looked out of the western window down into a pool of mist. The forest was hidden under a fog. It was like looking down onto a sloping cloud roof from above. There was a fold or channel where the mist was broken into many plumes and billows, the valley of the Withywindle. The stream ran down the hill on the left and vanished into the white shadows. Near at hand was a flower garden and a clipped hedge silver-netted, and beyond that gray-shaven grass pale with dewdrops. There was no willow tree to be seen. "Good morning, merry friends," cried Tom, opening the eastern window wide. A cool air flowed in. It had a rainy smell. "As much today, I'm thinking. I have been walking wide, leaping on the hilltops since the gray dawn began, nosing wind and weather, wet grass underfoot, wet sky above me. I wakened Goldberry singing under window. But naught wakes hobbit folk in the early morning. In the night little folk wake up in the darkness and sleep after light has come. Ring-a-ding-dillo. Wake now, my merry friends, forget the nightly noises. Ring-a-ding-dillo-dell, dairy dell my hearties." I'm glad they didn't do him in the movie because somebody would have, if it wasn't Jack Black, it would have been Robin Williams. Like, it would have been horrible. There's no way to do this. You can't read this out loud and be the same guy who reads this other stuff out loud. What's with him in the poetry? I mean, I don't mean to be bitter about this opportunity to read to you from one of the greatest writers of all time, but I mean, he could have crossed out this ring-a-ding-dillo-dell stuff and I'd be fine. Be fine. How did he read it? Like, he read this stuff out loud. He had this stentorious, pretentious British voice. Like, he sounded just like you would think. He sounded like Christopher Lee, but like somehow boring. Like that. Like, there's recordings of him reading some bits of Lord of the Rings. Like, he reads the One Ring to Rule Them All poem in one of the recordings, and it's boring enough that your attention is drifting by the time he gets to the end, and it's like 10 lines, and it's Tolkien. Like, you go in like, I can't wait to hear Tolkien read Tolkien. And by the time he gets to One Ring to Rule Them All, you're like, is there something else on? I couldn't read his stuff out loud at all. I find it, I find the rhythm of it, I don't know, I'm good at reading it. I really thought I thought that I'm not British would hinder this more. I have read big chunks of it out loud before and it went well, but like to my girlfriend Tay and then later to my daughter Red, like I read a bunch of Oz books to my wife too. Like that doesn't mean I'm the right guy to be reading Oz out loud if I have a choice for doing stuff in public, right? Like, but this is working out pretty good. Yeah, I'm getting better at it too. I don't know that anyone would ever like seriously record an American reader of Tolkien though. Like, he's so British. I'm really good at Mervyn Peake. I should do Titus Groan and Gormenghast next. Like, I've read those all the way through out loud a couple of times. I love those books. Dickens might be fun. Oliver Twist isn't the one I would do, though. I'm really obsessed with Dickens. I've read all his novels at least twice. The ones I love the best are Barnaby Rudge and Our Mutual and hardly anyone reads either of those books. Barnaby Rudge is just stunning. Barnaby Rudge is the book that gave Edgar Allan Poe the idea for The Raven, because there's this recurring thing with a talking raven, and it's not clear how smart the raven is. Like, there's a character, I think the title character, Barnaby Rudge, and everybody in the neighborhood thinks he's retarded, but he's severely autistic. Like, sometimes he's unexpectedly observant and smart. Dickens must have known somebody like that. Like, no, that didn't exist in psychiatric understanding in his time at all. Like, he wrote special introductions to the book edition of Barnaby Rudge, explaining about, like, that it's possible for, in any case, he's like, it's like he sometimes has flashes of clarity. And he's like a handyman and a known character in the neighborhood in sort of the suburbs outside London. And he has a pet that's a talking raven. And his talk sometimes seems like just entirely clued in, like, just sometimes seems like he knows what's going on. And the autistic guy and his raven, it never gets old. It's so great. Barnaby Rudge was one of Dickens's most popular novels in his own time. I don't know why it's been forgotten mostly. I really don't, actually. You know what? In England, it might be controversial because it has a huge sequences about what they called the Papist riots. And I know, like, Dickens calls it the Papist riots, and my British friends like wince, and they're like, "That's, you don't call it that anymore." Like, so maybe the history is like wounded. Um, I don't think I could do Dickens though. I'd have to do like a Dick Van Dyke kind of accent the whole time, like a really fake British accent. Hello, mates. Welcome back to another stream of reading Charles Dickens. Mr. Charles Dickens, to commoners like you and me. Okay, I'm not doing it. That came out too well. I'm too stoned. I'm too stoned. I know. Those two words don't go together. English is a funny language like that. You can put words together that just don't even make sense together. I'm trying to get out of having to read more Tom Bombadil, obviously. If you come soon, you'll find breakfast on the table. If you come late, you'll get grass and rainwater. Needless to say, not that Tom's threat sounded very serious, the hobbits came soon and left the table late, and only when it was beginning to look rather empty. See you soon, Josh. Thanks for coming in. These streams will be around later if you want to hear more later. Like, I figure most of the people who listen to these are going to listen to them later. Neither Tom nor Goldberry were there. Tom could be heard about the house, clattering in the kitchen and up and down the stairs and singing here and there outside. The room looked westward over the mist-clouded valley, and the window was open. Water dripped down from the thatched eaves above. Before they had finished breakfast, the clouds had joined into an unbroken roof, and straight gray rain came softly and steadily down. Behind its deep curtain, the forest was completely veiled. As they looked out of the window, there came falling gently, as if it was flowing down the rain out of the sky, the clear voice of Goldberry singing up above them. They could hear few words, but it seemed plain to them that the song was a rain song, as sweet as showers on dry hills, that told the tale of a river from the spring in the highlands to the sea far below. The hobbits listened with delight, and Frodo was glad in his heart, and blessed the kindly weather, because from departing. The thought of going had been heavy upon him from the moment he awoke, but he guessed now that they would not go further that day. Really. I do like Tom Bombadil when I'm reading the book silently. I'm dreading every time he enters. The upper wind settled in the west, and deeper and wetter clouds rolled up to spill their laden rain on the bare heads of the downs. Nothing could be seen all round the house but falling water. Frodo stood near the open door and watched the white chalky path turn into a little river of milk and go bubbling away down into the valley. Tom Bombadil came trotting round the corner of the house, waving his arms as if he was warding off the rain, and indeed when he sprang over the threshold he seemed quite dry, except for his boots. These he took off and put in the chimney corner. Then he sat in the largest chair and called the hobbits to gather round him. "This is Goldberry's washing day," he said, "and her autumn Too wet for hobbit folk. Let them rest while they are able. It's a good day for long tales, for questions and for answers, so Tom will start the talking. He then told them many remarkable stories, sometimes half as if speaking to himself, sometimes looking at them suddenly with a bright blue eye under his deep brows. Often his voice would turn to song, and he would get out of his chair and dance about. He told them tales of bees and flowers, the ways of trees, and the strange creatures of the forest, about the evil things and good things, things friendly and things unfriendly, cruel things and kind things, and secrets hidden under brambles. As they listened, they began to understand the lives of the forest, apart from themselves, indeed to feel themselves as the strangers where all other things were at home. Moving constantly in and out of his talk was Old Man Willow, and Frodo learned now enough to content him, indeed more than enough, for it was not comfortable lore. Tom's words laid bare the hearts of trees and their thoughts, which were often dark and strange, and filled with a hatred of things that go free upon the earth, gnawing, biting, breaking, hacking, burning, destroyers, and usurpers. It was not called the Old Forest without reason, for it was indeed ancient, a survivor of vast forgotten woods, and in it there lived yet, aging no quicker than the hills, the fathers of trees, remembering times when they were lords. The countless years had filled them with pride and rooted wisdom and with malice, but none were more dangerous than the great willow. His heart was rotten, but his strength was green, and he was cunning and a master of winds, and his song and thought ran through the woods on both sides of the river. His gray, thirsty spirit drew power out of the earth and spread like fine root threads in the ground and invisible twig fingers in the air, till it had under its dominion nearly all the trees of the forest from the hedge to the downs. Suddenly Tom's talk left the woods and went leaping up the young stream, over bubbling waterfalls, over pebbles and worn rocks, and among small flowers and close grass and wet crannies, wandering at last up onto the downs. They heard of the great barrows and the green mounds and the stone rings upon the hills and in the hollows among the hills. Sheep were bleating in flocks. Green walls and white walls rose. There were fortresses on the heights. Kings of little kingdoms fought together, and the young sun shone like fire on the red metal of their new and greedy swords. There was victory and defeat, and towers fell. Fortresses were burned, and flames went up into the sky. Gold was piled on the biers of dead kings and queens, and mounds covered them, and the stone doors were shut, and the grass grew over all. Sheep walked for a while, biting the grass, but soon the hills were empty again. A shadow came. Bones were stirred in the mounds. Barrow wights walked in the hollow places with a clink of rings on cold fingers and gold chains in the wind. Stone rings grinned out of the ground like broken teeth in the moonlight. The hobbits shuddered. Even in the Shire, the rumor of the Barrow Wights of the Barrow Downs beyond the forest had been heard. But it was not a tale that any hobbit liked to listen to, even by a comfortable fireside far away. These four now suddenly remembered what the joy of this house had driven from their minds. The house of Tom Bombadil nestled under the very shoulder of those dreaded hills. They lost the thread of his tale and shifted uneasily, looking aside at one another. When they caught his words again, they found that he had now wandered into strange regions beyond their memory and beyond their waking thought, into times when the world was wider and the seas flowed straight to the western shore. And still on and back, Tom went singing out into ancient awake. Then suddenly he stopped, and they saw that he nodded as if he was falling asleep. The hobbit sat still before him and chanted, and it seemed as if under the spell of his words the wind had gone, and the clouds had dried up, and the day had been withdrawn, and darkness had come from east and west, and all the sky was filled with the light of white stars. Whether the morning and evening of one day or of many days had passed, Frodo could not tell. He did not feel either hungry or tired, only filled with wonder. The stars shone through the window, and the silence of the heavens seemed to be round him. He spoke at last out of his wonder and a sudden fear of that silence. "Who are you, master?" he asked. "Eh? What?" said Tom, sitting up, and his eyes glinted in the gloom. "Don't you know my name yet?" That's the only answer. Tell me, who are you alone, yourself and nameless? But you are young and I am old, eldest my words, my friends. Tom was here before the river and the trees. Tom remembers the first raindrop and the first acorn. He made paths before the big people and saw the little people arriving. He was here before the kings and the graves and the barrow wights. When the elves passed westward, Tom was here already, before the seas were bent. He knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless, before the Dark Lord came from outside. A shadow seemed to pass by the window, and the hobbits glanced hastily through the panes. When they turned again, Goldberry stood in the door behind, framed in light. She held a candle, shielding its flame from the draught with her hand, and the light flowed through it like sunlight through a white shell. The rain has ended, she said, and new waters are running downhill under the stars. Let us now laugh and be glad. And let us have food and drink, cried Tom. Long tales are thirsty, and long listening's hungry work, morning, noon, and evening. With that, he jumped out of his chair and with a bound took a candle from the chimney shelf and lit it in the flame that Goldberry held. Then he danced about the table. Suddenly, he hopped through the door and disappeared. I'm going to stop for a second and take some more kratom and another gummy because I got to be up and I got to open the restaurant. I shouldn't be this awake now. Thanks for being here, guys. Yeah, thanks for being here. That passage is really intense. I figured out who should play Tom Bombadil in the movie. I figured it out while I was reading that. In the proper movie of Lord of the Rings, Tom Bombadil should be a Muppet, like Yoda. Tom Bombadil should be a creation of the Brian Henson Creature Workshop. That's how that should go. Duh. Like, I can't believe it took me that long to realize that. It was a little bit on the nose. People will be like, they're trying to do Yoda. Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's Yoda. Sorta. Even with the voice and the affect. It seems like George Lucas and his writers probably they were parodying Tom Bombadil a little when they came up with Yoda. I don't know. I mean, there were multiple writers who were really good in the room on that script. Like, they might have consciously known they were riffing on Tom Bombadil a little bit with him talking sideways and such. Taylor Momsen would be good for Goldberry. I don't know who that is. I would want to make him a Muppet, and then I would want to cast her in such a way as to fuck with the. Oh, I swore. God damn it. I was going to say I would want to mess with the expectations people have for woke casting. Like, I would want to cast like a black girl and paint her green and be like, what? There's nothing wrong with that. Actually, Goldberry, you'd paint her gold. It's what I would have done with Snow White. When I heard that they were casting Snow White, like, I don't remember how they miscast the Snow White remake so that they messed it up. But I remember thinking, like, in the story, she's not supposed to look like a white girl. She's supposed to look porcelain white, like something is wrong with her. It's really clear that she's not normal. Like, if you want to do something with race politics there's something you could do. But I would have wanted to cast a black girl and paint her like bone white. I'd be like, what? She was just the best girl at the audition. I don't know what you guys are saying you thought I was saying or trying to say. She was just the best girl at the audition. Played Susie Who in one of the Grinch movies. Gandalf, the reason that the Attic Expeditions has really lousy looking gore effects the two times that there's a gore unit thing is because they were shooting the ballroom party scene for How the Grinch Stole Christmas with Jim Carrey the week we did that. And so everyone who was competent to do any kind of applied makeup in all of Hollywood was working on like 50 weirdo makeup faces for that movie. So our shit sucks. stuff in attic expeditions. Like when Ted Raimi, it looks really fake. The exposed brain looks like crap. You know, I'm just going to have to go back to the beginning and read from the beginning of this book again until I can learn not to fucking swear in these streams. Or I could learn to edit. No, I do this live. It's set to not for kids. That's all I can do. Tolkien himself actually would have had, I don't know how he would have put it, but the fact that Lord of the Rings has ended up being universally taken and basically marketed as some kind of young adult fiction, like it's basically for precocious sixth graders. He would be, I don't know how he would express it, but he would not have been happy with that any more than he was happy with like the stoner and acid damaged American youth audience in the mid 60s taking it up as the central novel of their generation. Cool. Wait, I know that music. I was telling Dave, like when he played Frank Zappa really loud while I was reading Tolkien the other night, like that was really cool, but I don't think you could hear it. Not well enough for it to really be the soundtrack. That's either Sabbath or Zeppelin. I did tell him I'd be reading Tolkien. It's probably Zeppelin. No, it's Sabbath. The Pretty Reckless. I've heard of them. I don't know if I've heard them, but I've heard of them. Because Sabbath is a pretty good soundtrack. Watch, I'm going to get a copyright strike. You can edit out all the sound. Right. Quickly he returned, bearing a large and laden tray. Then Tom and Goldberry set the table, and the hobbit sat half in wonder and half in laughter. So fair was the grace of Goldberry, and so merry and odd the caperings of Tom. Yet in some fashion they seemed to weave a single dance, neither hindering the other, in and out of the room, and round about the table, and with great speed food and vessels and lights were set in order. The boards blazed with candles, white and yellow. Tom bowed to his guests. "Supper is ready," said Goldberry, and now the hobbit saw that she was clothed all in silver, with a white girdle, and her shoes were like fish's mail. But Tom was all in clean blue as rain-washed forget-me-nots, and he had green stockings. It was a supper even better than before. The hobbits, under the spell of Tom's words, may have missed one meal or many, but when the food was before them, it seemed at least a week since they had eaten. It's worth interrupting here to point out that over the course of the period of time Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings, food got scarce in England, and towards the end he was writing under wartime rationing, and it shows. Like the obsession with food, and then it becoming trail food, and then like they don't have any food, like that. It's all over this novel. And the Return of the King is definitely the weak one of the three books taken separately. But if you read it all as one novel, it just feels like it's literally being sort of starved towards the end. And it's not the only major that has that. Evelyn Waugh used to joke that he didn't like Brideshead Revisited, even though it was kind of his biggest hit. And he at least once joked that it was clearly written under wartime food rationing. The hobbits, under the spell of Tom's words, may have missed one meal or many, but when the food was before them, it seemed at least a week since they had eaten. They did not sing or even speak much for a while, and paid close attention to business. But after a time, their hearts and spirits rose high again, and their voices rang out in mirth and laughter. After they had eaten, Goldberry sang many songs for them. songs that began merrily in the hills and fell softly down into silence. And in the silences they saw in their minds pools and waters wider than any they had known. And looking into them, they saw the sky below them and the stars like jewels in the depths. Then once more she wished them each good night and left them by the fireside. But Tom now seemed wide awake and plied them with questions. It's also worth interrupting to point out there's a lot of stuff in this novel that makes it seem like Tolkien had close friends who were into drugs. Like it doesn't seem like he himself was into drugs, but he understood the complicated way that drugs and addiction were tied to creativity and energy and madness. Um, the Gollum and the Ring, for sure, is influenced by some close observation of opium addiction. He was a World War I vet, so he would have known crippled veterans. But I think he also had close friends who were into drugs as writers. In his time, there was no entrenched, broader drug culture. If you were, say, into taking mescaline and writing, there wouldn't have been any reason for you to clearly signal that within your work. There was no winking and nodding at other people on the same stuff. The subcultures for weird drugs and the art that they inspire in his day were very small and very contained and locked in. There's a sort of opium and cocaine and absinthe vibe about a lot of classic fantasy literature. You read these guys close, and some of them were clearly. Well, in any case, it doesn't seem like Tolkien was high. I think he just read good literature very closely and observed certain kinds of behavior really closely. I was thinking of this thing with Tom Bombadil speaking and his energy coming and going, like the magic is coming and going, and they don't know how long. I mean, it's almost like I've been there. He appeared, oh, right, but Tom now seemed wide awake and plied them with questions. He appeared already to know much about them and all their families, and indeed to know much of all the history and doings of the Shire down from days hardly remembered among the hobbits themselves. It no longer surprised them, but he made no secret that he owed his recent knowledge largely to Farmer Maggot, whom he seemed to regard as a person of more importance than they had imagined. There's earth under his old feet and clay on his fingers, wisdom in his bones, and both his eyes are open, said Tom. It was also clear that Tom had dealings with the elves, and it seemed that in some fashion news had reached him from Gildor concerning the flight of Frodo. Indeed, so much did Tom know, and so cunning was his questioning, that Frodo found himself telling him more about Bilbo and his own hopes and fears than he had told before even to Gandalf. Tom wagged his head up and down, and there was a glint in his eyes when he heard of the riders. "Show me the precious ring," he said suddenly in the midst of the story, and Frodo, to his own astonishment, drew out the chain from his pocket and, unfastening the ring, handed it at once to Tom. It seemed to grow larger as it lay for a moment on his big brown-skinned hand. Then suddenly he put it to his eye and laughed. For a second, the hobbits had a vision, both comical and alarming, of his bright blue eye gleaming through a circle of gold. Then Tom put the ring round the end of his little finger and held it up to the candlelight. For a moment, the hobbits noticed nothing strange about this. Then they gasped. There was no sign of Tom disappearing. Tom laughed again, and then he spun the ring in the air, and it vanished with a flash. Frodo gave a cry and forward and handed it back to him with a smile. Frodo looked at it closely and rather suspiciously, like one who has lent a trinket to a juggler. It was the same ring, or looked the same, and weighed the same, for that ring had always seemed to Frodo to weigh strangely heavy in the hand. That's one of those little inconsistencies that I was talking about. World building was in its infancy as a thing that fantasy writers do in Tolkien's day. Also, there are little things that make it clear he wrote chapters out of order. Like he had a really detailed outline and then he wrote different parts. Frodo's already had experience of the ring changing weights. He talked about it earlier. I mean, it's a long, complicated novel to be consistent on points like that. It also indicates how long he'd been thinking about it. I've got an eyelash in my eye. Hello, Katya Saga. To be strung out on opium was looked down. Even women getting hooked on laudanum was treated with a raised eyebrow and usually scorned, especially later in the 18th and 19th centuries. I would say in this context of crippled vets being damaged by drug addiction, first lifted up and then knocked down by the slow debilitation of opium addiction. First, it's a miracle drug that helps with the pain, and then it becomes the problem. The way that parallels Gollum's descent and the damage of the ring. He would have been familiar with it. If you read the literature really closely, there's the general anyone who is pretty smart and well-traveled and had friends in high and low places understood how drug addiction worked, but better than most generations since then. It kind of doesn't matter what the drug is. Certain kinds of dependency spiral downward. So you can see what meth does in what happens to Gollum, the magic of the ring, and then also it parallels opium addiction. The idea that the ring has magic powers that you cannot access unless you're a powerful magician and are trained right. This seems like psychedelic drugs, but it would grow out of a sharp, insightful understanding of how drug addiction works. Observe, like I said, I suspect Tolkien must have known somebody who did really advanced creative work under the influence of strange drugs and later was prevented from doing so further by the same strange drugs. A cycle you see in the lives of a lot of artists. And I mean, it also has to do with age and mental and physical health in larger senses. Like you see that curve play out, the rise and fall. You see it in my life. My health went out. Drug addiction ensued or attended upon my health going out. You don't see me writing movies now. I mean, maybe later. But YouTube recommendations at 2 a.m. Really? Well, it's nice to see you guys. I got an eyelash in my eye. Hold on. Wait, do I still have water in my water bottle? I'm definitely going to read for another 20 to 30 minutes. It's interesting you guys said recommendations brought you in because the numbers, like the reading streams, kind of have to go on for at least an hour 15 or people don't seem to come in. There's bumps that are clearly the algorithm. I'm just going to splash water in my face to get this eyelash out of my eye. I'll be right back. Hopefully that worked. If you guys are new here, I've been reading Tolkien. One of the things that is fun about reading Tolkien in here with us is hanging out with live chat. I will get distracted to talk about the text. Like, I won't get distracted to talk about other stuff much. But I think Tolkien is worth live annotation for a lot of reasons. And I think like Lovecraft, Tolkien, I think is more rewarding when you have it read to you out loud by design or chance. It's actually easier to catch, not everything, but it's easier to catch it at the right level when it's read out loud. It really does have a narrative distance. The voice is distant in sort of the way that classic fairy tales are. It is not like a modern novel. And so most people who try to read Tolkien, especially if you come at it as a fan of the movies, it's hard to get into. Like, it doesn't line up with your expectations. It's not like watching a really exciting game of Dungeons and Dragons play out, except in bits and pieces. It's like expecting an epic war novel to always be exciting the way that the big combat scenes are. It's kind of like if Saving Private Ryan ended with the 30-minute long landing on the beach, but started with like an hour of quiet, charming scenes about Tom Hanks's home life before he got to the war. Lenny, thank you. It's lagging. It's doing weird stuff. The light's doing weird stuff again. Yeah, it's a shame I didn't get to go to college. I could be an actual professor. Thank you. That's the ring had always seemed to Frodo to weigh strangely heavy in the hand, but something prompted him to make sure. He was perhaps a trifle annoyed with Tom for seeming to make so light of what even Gandalf thought so perilously important. He waited for an opportunity when the talk was going again, and Tom was telling an absurd story about badgers and their queer ways, and then he slipped the ring on. Merry turned towards him to say something and gave a start and checked an exclamation. Frodo was delighted in a way. It was his own ring, all right, for Merry was staring blankly at his chair and obviously could not see him. He got up and crept quietly away from the fireside towards the outer door. "Hey there," cried Tom, glancing towards him with a most seeing look in his shining eyes. "Hey, come, Frodo, there. Where be you a-going? Old Tom Bombadil's not as blind as that yet. Take off your golden ring. Your hand's more fair without it. Come back. Leave your game and sit down beside me. We must talk a while more and think about the morning. Tom must teach the right road and keep your feet from wandering." Frodo laughed, trying to feel pleased, and taking off the ring, he came and sat down again. Tom now told them that he reckoned the sun would shine tomorrow, and it would be a glad morning, and setting out would be hopeful. But they would do well to start early, for weather in that country was a thing that even Tom could not be sure of for long, and it would change sometimes quicker than he could change his jacket. "I am no weather master," said he, "nor is aught that goes on two legs." By his advice, they decided to make nearly due north from his house, over the western and lower slopes of the downs. They might hope in that way to strike the east road in a day's journey and avoid the barrows. He told them not to be afraid, but to mind their own business. "Keep to the green grass. Don't you go a-meddling with old stone or cold whites or prying in their houses, unless you be strong folk with hearts that never falter." He said this more than once, and he advised them to pass barrows by on the west side if they chanced to stray near one. Then he taught them a rhyme to sing if they should by ill luck fall into any danger or difficulty the next day. "Oh, Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadillo, by water, wood, and hill, by the reed and willow, by fire, sun, and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us." When they had sung this all together after him, he clapped them each on the shoulder with a laugh, and taking candles, led them back to their bedroom. He's totally the thing that you do where, like, a character hands another character a gun and is like, "I hope you won't have to use this." You're like, we wouldn't even see the gun if he didn't have to use it. We know now he's gonna have to use it. Like, what do you mean? Oh my God, my eye is gonna fall out of my head. There's no mirrors here. I don't have any way to look at my own eye. So this happened a couple of times with eyelashes. Like, I don't have any way to fix it except to like run water over it really like aggressively. I mean, do I have a bottle of water in here? I did earlier. Soap. I'll just pour soap in it. That'll work, right? What did happen to the water I had earlier? No, really. How did it must be right here, the water. I must have drank some while I was playing guitar. I'm right? No, really, where's the water bottle? Hold on. That's strange. I was joking about it. Somebody was like joking about chugging liquor, and it was that little Canada Dry bottle. So it would be in my bag. It must be out somewhere. That's really weird. Did I leave the room to fill it and then not fill it? Hold on. That doesn't make sense either. It's not in the other room. What's really frustrating is I know that like whatever I did with it is actually on the stream somewhere. Probably the other one. But like taking 10 minutes while I'm live to figure out what I did with something while I was live is a fool's game. It is a fool's errand. And there's a pretty good chance it wouldn't even be visible. I've put it in here. I put the water bottle in a drawer. Why did I do that? What am I high? Zoe hit it with my hands. If I hold my eye close enough to the camera for it to see it, then I won't be able to see it. There's nothing I can do but take a shower. I'm going to read a little bit more first now. Maybe I should just hold it shut. Yeah, it's not bad. People will be like, why are you doing that? Chapter 8, Fog on the Barrow Downs. That night they heard no noises, but either in his dreams or out of them, he could not tell which, Frodo heard a sweet singing running in his mind, a song that seemed to come like a pale light behind a gray rain curtain, and growing stronger to turn the veil all to glass and silver, until at last it was rolled back, and a far green country opened before him under a swift sunrise. The vision melted into waking, and there was Tom whistling like a tree full of birds, and the sun was already slanting down the hill and through the open window. Outside, everything was green and pale gold. After breakfast, which they again ate alone, they made ready to say farewell, as nearly heavy of heart as was possible on such a morning, cool, bright, and clean, under a washed autumn sky of thin blue. The air came fresh from the northwest. Their quiet ponies were almost frisky, sniffing and moving restlessly. Tom came out of the house and waved his hat and danced upon the doorstep, bidding the hobbits to get up and be off and go with good speed. They rode off along a path that wound away from behind the house and went slanting up towards the north end of the hill brow under which it sheltered. They had just dismounted to lead their ponies up the last steep slope when suddenly Frodo stopped. "Goldberry," he cried. "My fair lady, clad all in silver green. We have never said farewell to her nor seen her since the evening." He was so distressed that he turned back, but at that moment a clear call came rippling down. There on the hill brow she stood beckoning to them. Her hair was flying loose, and as it caught the sun it shone and shimmered. A light like the glint of water on dewy grass flashed from under her feet as she danced. They hastened up the last slope and stood breathless beside her. They bowed, but with a wave of her arm she bade them look around, and they looked out from the hilltop over lands under the morning. It was now as clear and far seen as it had been veiled and misty when they stood upon the knoll in the forest, which could now be seen rising pale and green out of the dark trees in the west. In that direction the land rose in wooded ridges, green, yellow, russet under the sun, beyond which lay hidden the valley of the Brandywine. To the south, over the line of the Withywindle, there was a distant glint like pale glass where the Brandywine River made a great loop in the lowlands and flowed away out of the knowledge of the hobbits. Northward beyond the dwindling downs, the land ran away in flats and swellings of gray and green and pale earth colors until it faded into a featureless and shadowy distance. Eastward, the Barrow Downs rose, ridge behind ridge, into the morning, and vanished out of eyesight into a guess. It was no more than a guess of blue and a remote white glimmer blending with the hem of the sky, but it spoke to them, out of memory and old tales, of the high and distant mountains. They took a deep draught of the air and felt that a skip and a few stout strides would bear them wherever they wished. It seemed faint-hearted to go jogging aside over the crumpled skirts of the downs towards the road, when they should be leaping, as lusty as Tom, over the stepping stones of the hills straight towards the mountains. Goldberry spoke to them and recalled their eyes and thoughts. "Speed now, fair guests," she said, "and hold to your purpose. North with the wind in the left eye and a blessing on your footsteps. Make heart while the sun shines." Yes, Zoe? Are you trying to startle me? That was very clever of you. Yes, Zoe. You guys can't really see her. She's a little bit off camera. She just came bounding up under the desk to try to startle me. She wanted me to yell at her for stepping on the keyboard, but she also wanted to not step on the keyboard. So she leapt up like right next to it. They don't have enough food, is what they're fussing about. I forgot to get food. The bowl is almost empty. I'm gonna have to get food first thing. Yes, Zoe, I love you. Are you gonna get in my lap? All right. It's very awkward, but I have to hold the book like this. It looks like I have a cat tail growing out of the middle of my back. But Frodo found no words to answer. He bowed low and mounted his pony, and followed by his friends, jogged slowly down the gentle slope behind the hill. Tom Bombadil's house in the valley and the forest were lost to view. The air grew warmer between the green walls of hillside, and the scent of turf rose strong and sweet as they breathed. Turning back, when they reached the bottom of the green hollow, they saw Goldberry, now small and slender like a sunlit flower against the sky. She was standing still, watching them, and her hands were stretched out towards them. As they looked, she gave a clear call, and lifting up her hand, she turned and vanished behind the hill. Their way wound along the floor of the hollow, and round the green feet of a steep hill into another deeper and broader valley, and then over the shoulders of further hills, and down their long limbs, and up their smooth sides again, up onto new hilltops and down into new valleys. There was no tree nor any visible water. It was a country of grass and short springy turf, silent except for the whisper of the air over the edges of the land, and high lonely cries of strange birds. As they journeyed, the sun mounted and grew hot. Each time they climbed a ridge, the breeze seemed to have grown less. When they caught a glimpse of the country westward, the distant forest seemed to be smoking, as if the fallen rain was steaming up again from leaf and root and mold. A shadow now lay round the edge of sight, a dark haze above which the upper sky was like a blue cap, hot and heavy. About midday, they came to a hill whose top was wide and flattened, like a shallow saucer with a green mounded rim. Inside there was no air stirring, and the sky seemed near their heads. They rode across and looked northwards. Then their hearts rose, for it seemed plain that they had come further already than they had expected. Certainly the distances had now all become hazy and deceptive, but there could be no doubt that the downs were coming to an end. A long valley lay below them, winding away northwards, until it came to an opening between two steep shoulders. Beyond, there seemed to be no more hills. Due north, they faintly glimpsed a long, dark line. "That is a line of trees," said Mary, "and that must mark the road. All along it, for many leagues east of the bridge, there are trees growing. Some say they were planted in the old days." Zoe, 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 you're going to hurt me. Stop. Zoe, Zoe, what are you doing? You've got to stop. Don't do that, man. Okay, you can hop up there now from that direction, weirdo. Zoe, you can hop up from that direction. She tried to bend herself farther than a cat can bend, doing what she was trying to do there. She is very willful, even for a cryptic tortoiseshell cat. An obsopaz kitty, as Jelly would say. She's like Heath Ledger in the Batman movies. I'm not Batman, but she is the Joker. There is no Batman. There is no Batman. There's only Zool. "Splendid," said Frodo. "If we make as good going this afternoon as we have done this morning, we shall have left the downs before the sun sets and be jogging on in search of a camping place." But even as he spoke, he turned his glance eastwards, and he saw that on that side the hills were higher and looked down upon them, and all those hills were crowned with green mounds, and on some were standing stones, pointing upwards like jagged teeth out of green gums. That view was somehow disquieting, so they turned from the sight and went down into the hollow circle. In the midst of it there stood a single stone, standing tall under the sun above, and at this hour casting no shadow. It was shapeless and yet significant, like a landmark or a guarding finger, or more like a warning. But they were now hungry, and the sun was still at the fearless noon, so they set their backs against the east side of the stone. It was cool, as if the sun had had no power to warm it, but at that time this seemed pleasant. There they took food and drink, and made as good a noon meal under the open sky as anyone could wish, for the food came from down under hill. Tom had provided them with plenty for the comfort of the day. Their ponies, unburdened, strayed upon the grass. Riding over the hills and eating their fill, the warm sun and the scent of turf, lying a little too long, stretching out their legs and looking at the sky above their noses, these things are perhaps enough to explain what happened. However that may be, they woke suddenly and uncomfortably from a sleep they had never meant to take. The standing stone was cold, and it cast a long pale shadow that stretched eastward over them. The sun, a pale and watery yellow, was gleaming through the mist just above the west wall of the hollow in which they lay. North, south, and east, beyond the wall, the fog was thick, cold, and white. The air was silent, heavy, and chill. Their ponies were standing crowded together with their heads down. The hobbits sprang to their feet in alarm and ran to the western rim. They found that they were upon an island in the fog. Even as they looked out in dismay towards the setting sun, it sank before their eyes into a white sea, and a cold gray shadow sprang up in the east behind. The fog rolled up to the walls and rose above them, and as it mounted, it bent over their heads until it became a roof. They were shut in a hall of mist whose central pillar was the standing stone. They felt as if a trap was closing about them, but they did not quite lose heart. They still remembered the hopeful view they had had of the line of the road ahead, and they still knew in which direction it lay. In any case, they now had so great a dislike for that hollow place about the stone that no thought of remaining there was in their minds. They packed up as quickly as their chilled fingers would work. Soon they were leading their ponies in single file over the rim and down the long northward slope of the hill, down into a foggy sea. As they went down, the mist became colder and damper, and their hair hung lank and dripping on their foreheads. When they reached the bottom, it was so chill that they halted and got out cloaks and hoods, which soon became bedewed with gray drops. Then, mounting their ponies, they went slowly on again, feeling their way by the rise and fall of the ground. They were steering, as well as they could guess, for the gate-like opening at the far northward end of the long valley which they had seen in the morning. Once they were through the gap, they had only to keep on in anything like a straight line, and they were bound in the end to strike the road. Their thoughts did not go beyond that, except for a vague hope that perhaps away beyond the downs there might be no fog. Their going was very slow. To prevent their getting separated and wandering in different directions, they went in file, with Frodo leading. Sam was behind him, and after him came Pippin, and then Merry. The valley seemed to stretch on endlessly. Suddenly Frodo saw a hopeful sign. On either side ahead a darkness began to loom through the mist, and he guessed that they were at last approaching the gap in the hills, the north gate of the Barrow Downs. If they could pass that, they would be free. "Come on, follow me," he called back over his shoulder, and he hurried forward. But his hope soon changed to bewilderment and alarm. The dark patches grew darker, but they shrank, and suddenly he saw, towering ominous before him and leaning slightly towards one another like the pillars of a headless door, two huge standing stones. He could not remember having seen any sign of these in the valley when he looked out from the hill in the morning. He had passed between them almost before he was aware, and even as he did so, darkness seemed to fall round him. His pony reared and snorted, and he fell off. When he looked back, he found that he was alone. The others had not followed him. "Sam," he called, "Pippin, Merry, come along. Why don't you keep up?" There was no answer. Fear took him, and he ran back past the stones, shouting wildly, "Sam! Sam! Merry! Pippin!" The pony bolted into the mist and vanished. From some way off, or so it seemed, he thought he heard a cry, "Hoy, Frodo, hoy!" It was away eastward, on his left as he stood under the great stones, staring and straining into the gloom. He plunged off in the direction of the call and found himself going steeply uphill. As he struggled on, he called again and kept on calling more and more frantically, but he heard no answer for some time, and then it seemed faint and far ahead and high above him. "Frodo, hoy!" came the thin voices out of the mist, and then a cry that sounded like help, help, often repeated, ending with a last help that trailed off into a long wail suddenly cut short. He stumbled forward with all the speed he could towards the cries, but the light was now gone, and clinging night had closed about him, so that it was impossible to be sure of any direction. He seemed all the time to be climbing up and up. Only the change in the level of the ground at his feet told him when he at last came to the top of a ridge or hill. He was weary, sweating, and yet chilled. It was wholly dark. "Where are you?" he cried out miserably. There was no reply. He stood listening. He was suddenly aware that it was getting very cold, and that up here a wind was beginning to blow, an icy wind. A change was coming in the weather. The mist was flowing past him now in shreds and tatters. His breath was smoking, and the darkness was less near and thick. He looked up and saw with surprise that faint stars were appearing overhead amid the strands of hurrying cloud and fog. The wind began to hiss over the grass. He imagined suddenly that he caught a muffled cry, and he made towards it, and even as he went forward, the mist was rolled up and thrust aside, and the starry sky was unveiled. A glance showed him that he was now facing southwards, and was on a round hilltop, which he must have climbed from the north. Out of the east the biting wind was blowing. To his right there loomed against the westward stars a dark black shape. A great barrow stood there. "Where are you?" he cried again, both angry and afraid. "Here," said a voice, deep and cold, that seemed to come out of the ground. "I am waiting for you." "No," said Frodo, but he did not run away. His knees gave, and he fell on the ground. Nothing happened, and there was no sound. Trembling, he looked up, in time to see a tall, dark figure like a shadow against the stars. It leaned over him. He thought there were two eyes, very cold, though lit with a pale light that seemed to come from some remote distance. Then a grip stronger and colder than iron seized him. The icy touch froze his bones, and he remembered no more. When he came to himself again, for a moment he could recall nothing except a sense of dread. Then suddenly he knew that he was imprisoned, caught hopelessly. He was in a barrow. A barrow wight had taken him, and he was probably already under the dreadful spells of the barrow wights about which whispered tales spoke. He dared not move, but lay as he found himself, flat on his back upon a cold stone with his hands on his breast. But though his fear was so great that it seemed to be part of the very darkness that was round him, he found himself as he lay thinking about Bilbo Baggins and his stories, of their jogging along together in the lanes of the Shire and talking about roads and adventures. There is a seed of courage hidden, often deeply, it is true, in the heart of the fattest and most timid hobbit, waiting for some final and desperate danger to make it grow. Frodo was neither very fat nor very timid. Indeed, though he did not know it, Bilbo and Gandalf had thought him the best hobbit in the Shire. He thought he had come to the end of his adventure, and a terrible end, but the thought hardened him. He found himself stiffening, as if for a final spring. He no longer felt limp like a helpless prey. As he lay there, thinking and getting a hold of himself, he noticed all at once that the darkness was slowly giving way. A pale greenish light was growing round him. It did not at first show him what kind of a place he was in, for the light seemed to be coming out of himself and from the floor beside him, and had not yet reached the roof or wall. He turned, and there in the cold glow he saw lying beside him Sam, Pippin, and Merry. They were on their backs, and their faces looked deathly pale, and they were clad in white. About them lay many treasures, of gold, maybe, though in that light they looked cold and unlovely. On their heads were circlets, gold chains were about their waists, and on their fingers were many rings. Swords lay by their sides, and shields were at their feet, but across their three necks lay one long naked sword. Suddenly a song began, a cold murmur, rising and falling. The voice seemed far away and immeasurably dreary, sometimes high in the air and thin, sometimes like a low moan from the ground. Out of the formless stream of sad but horrible sounds, strings of words would now and again shape themselves, grim, hard, cold words, heartless and miserable. The night was railing against the morning of which it was bereaved, and the cold was cursing the warmth for which it hungered. Frodo was chilled to the marrow. After a while, the song became clearer, and with dread in his heart, he perceived that it had changed into an incantation. Cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone, never more to wake on stony bed, never till the sun fails and the moon is dead. In the black wind the stars shall die. and still on gold here let them lie, till the dark Lord lifts his hand over dead sea and withered land. He heard behind his head a creaking and scraping sound. Raising himself on one arm, he looked, and saw now in the pale light that they were in a kind of passage which behind them turned a corner. Round the corner a long arm was groping, walking on its fingers towards Sam, who was lying nearest, and towards the hilt of the sword that lay upon him. At first Frodo felt as if he had indeed been turned into stone by the incantation. Then a wild thought of escape came to him. He wondered if he put on the ring, whether the Barrow-wight would miss him, and he might find some way out. He thought of himself running free over the grass, grieving for Merry and Sam and Pippin, but free and alive himself. Gandalf would admit that there had been nothing else he could do. But the courage that had been awakened in him was now too strong. He could not leave his friends so easily. He wavered, groping in his pocket, and then fought with himself again, and as he did so, the arm crept nearer. Suddenly resolve hardened in him, and he seized a short sword that lay beside him, and kneeling he stooped low over the bodies of his companions. With what strength he had, he hewed at the crawling arm near the wrist, and the hand broke off, but at the same moment the sword splintered up to the hilt. There was a shriek, and the light vanished. In the dark there was a snarling noise. Frodo fell forward over Merry, and Merry's face felt cold. All at once back into his mind, from which it had disappeared with the first coming of the fog, came the memory of the house down under the hill and of Tom singing. He remembered the rhyme that Tom had taught them. In a small, desperate voice he began, "Ho, Tom Bombadil," and with that name his voice seemed to grow strong. It had a full and lively sound, and the dark chamber echoed as if to drum and trumpet. "Ho, Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadillo." Dude. I mean, must you? All right. By water, wood, and hill, by the reed and willow, by fire, sun, and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us. There was a sudden deep silence in which Frodo could hear his heart beating. After a long, slow moment, he heard plain, but far away, as if it was coming down through the ground or through thick walls, an answering voice singing. Old Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow. Bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow. He just started playing the cult. Is that Love Removal Machine? That's Love Removal Machine, isn't it? That's great. There's no way he could know that he did that. Oh, leave it up. Turn it up. Do you want it louder or what? Old Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow. Bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow. None has ever caught him yet, for Tom he is the master. His songs are stronger songs, and his feet are faster. There was a loud rumbling sound as of stones rolling and falling, and suddenly light streamed in, real light, the plain light of day. A low door-like opening appeared at the end of the chamber beyond Frodo's feet, and there was Tom's head, hat, feather, and all, framed against the light of the sun rising red behind him. The light fell upon the floor, and upon the faces of the three hobbits lying beside Frodo. They did not stir, but the sickly hue had left them. They looked now as if they were only very deeply asleep. Tom stooped, removed his hat, and came into the dark chamber, singing, "Get out, you old wight, vanish in the sunlight, shrivel like the cold mist, like the winds go wailing, out into the barren lands, far beyond the mountains. Come never here again, leave your barrow empty, lost and forgotten be, darker than the darkness, where gates stand forever shut till the world is mended." Yeah, I just went through that without investing myself in it. That wasn't really fair. I really don't like reading the Tom Bombadil poems. I really don't. At these words, there was a cry. All right. You know what? My idea about a Muppet being Tom Bombadil was wrong. Big Dave is Tom Bombadil, is how this works. And I can play Radagast. By the time we get there, I'll probably be old enough to fucking play. Oh my god. I'm swearing again. At these words, there was a cry, and part of the inner end of the chamber fell in with a crash. Then there was a long trailing shriek, fading away into an unguessable distance, and after that, silence. Come, friend Frodo, said Tom. Let us get out onto clean grass. You must help me bear them. Together they carried out Merry, Pippin, and Sam. As Frodo left the barrow for the last time, he thought he saw a severed hand wriggling still like a wounded spider in a heap of fallen earth. Tom went back in again, and there was a sound of much thumping and stamping. When he came out, he was bearing in his arms a great load of treasure, things of gold, silver, copper, and bronze, many beads and chains and jeweled ornaments. He climbed the green barrow and laid them all on top in the sunshine. There he stood with his hat in his hand and the wind in his hair, and looked down upon the three hobbits that had been laid on their backs upon the grass at the west side of the mound. Raising his right hand, he said in a clear and commanding voice, Wake now, my merry lads, wake and hear me calling. Warm now be heart and limb, the cold stone is fallen. Dark door is standing wide, dead hand is broken. Night under night is flown, and the gate is open. To Frodo's great joy, the hobbits stirred, stretched their arms, rubbed their eyes, and then suddenly sprang up. They looked about in amazement, first at Frodo, and then at Tom, standing large as life on the barrow top above them, and then at themselves in their thin white rags, crowned and belted with pale gold and jingling with trinkets. What in the name of wonder, began Merry, feeling the golden circlet that had slipped over one eye. I know, Zoe. I'll pay attention to you guys soon. I'll have the fan on soon. You gonna get in my lap? Then he stopped and a shadow came over his face and he closed his eyes. Of course, I remember, he said. The men of Carn Dûn came on us at night and we were worsted. Ah, the spear in my heart. He clutched at his breast. No, no, he said, opening his eyes. What am I saying? I have been dreaming. Where did you get to, Frodo? I thought that I was lost, said Frodo, but I don't want to speak of it. Let us think of what we are to do now. Let us go on. What is it, Zoe? You just need attention. Here, I was going to give you guys the rest of the treats because I ran out of cat food like a fool. Here they are. Let's have all the rest of the treats, shall we? When you guys won't eat me in the night, in the dark. You guys didn't even like this cat food anyway. I know. Yeah? You're going to have some two-part racket. Yep. Yeah, Zoe likes to curl up in my lap when I'm reading, Karen. Yes, but you got to hop down on the book. Go ahead. Also, Zoe has consistently now, when I get mad and I yell at somebody in the chat, she hops up and starts like growling and yowling. It's very like cartoon, which is familiar. I thought that I was lost, said Frodo, but I don't want to speak of it. Let us think of what we are to do now. Let us go on. Dressed up like this, sir, said Sam. Where are my clothes? He flung his circlet, belt, and rings on the grass and looked round helplessly, as if he expected to find his cloak, jacket, and breeches and other hobbit garments lying somewhere to hand. You won't find your clothes again, said Tom, bounding down from the mound and laughing as he danced round them in the sunlight. One would have thought that nothing dangerous or dreadful had happened. And indeed the horror faded out of their hearts as they looked at him and saw the merry glint in his eyes. "What do you mean?" asked Pippin, looking at him, half puzzled and half amused. "Why not?" But Tom shook his head, saying, "You found yourselves again out of the deep water. Clothes are but little loss if you escape from drowning. Be glad, my merry friends, and let the warm sunlight heat now heart and limb. Cast off these cold rags. Run naked on the grass while Tom goes a-hunting." He sprang away downhill, whistling and calling. Looking down after him, Frodo saw him running away southwards along the green hollow between their hill and the next, still whistling and crying. "Hey now, come hoy now, whither do you wander? Up, down, near or far, here, there, or yonder? Sharp ears, wise nose, swish tail, and bumpkin. White socks, my little lad, and old fatty lumpkin." So he sang, running fast, tossing up his hat and catching it, until he was hidden by a fold of the ground. But for some time his hey now, hoy now, came floating back down the wind, which had shifted round towards the south. I'm going to stop there, guys. I got to get up early in the morning. Believe it or not, I'm only going to get about 7 hours sleep now. I wanted to... Oh, yeah, I am not a cat. Hi. Let's see. I can't believe this much. I got really into reading, I guess. I didn't see any of this going on. Hi, Joey's movie blog. Yes. Lenny Confetti, thank you for the compliments. I said that. I did see that at the time. Karen Akins, that sound effect was not actually a cat in the background. That was Dave howling, which I think prompted me to say that he has to play Tom Bombadil, but he might have actually done that after I said that. Yeah, this is really fun. It's really fun. Yeah. I just heard Dave say "Wind in the Willows." Well, he knows I'm reading Tolkien. I was gonna say, why is he like thinking in the same ballpark? But he knows I'm reading Tolkien. Okay, yeah. I was just gonna look at how many pages I'm getting through each night, but it's a little chaotic. So yeah. Tomorrow I'm working in the... Dude, guys, chill. Don't hiss at each other. Hi, Wacket. What are you doing? I love you guys. I'm not gonna have more cat food because you beat each other up. Oh, I do have one can of cat food. One though. They probably want me to clean up the litter though and maybe vacuum in here. It's a little gross. I gotta let it go a little bit. Pub songs at the Pony. Yeah, it's the Prancing Pony, right? I was gonna say Dancing Pony, but I think it's the Prancing Pony, the Inn at Brie. We're like 15 minutes into the Bakshi movie. I'll see you guys in the next one. Yeah. Hopefully my energy is good enough to do a chat stream and a reading stream tomorrow. I'm picking up a second job Friday. I'm getting hired at the Subway Exxon that I was talking about before. So I'm going to be aiming to work 60 hours a week at 2 different day jobs. If the streaming schedule has to be trimmed back, I'm going to stick to the reading streams first. Like these are going to take precedence over the chat and hanging out streams because they're not as high energy. And the work schedule, I may be coming in here later every night, like 1 in the morning instead of 11 or whatever. I don't know what time it is, but you know what I mean. I will see you guys tonight. Yes, thank you very much. I'm sorry I missed some nights with this, by the way, you guys. But there's starting to be a pile of them, so there's stuff to catch up on if you're a recent arrival, and yes, a little mumbly. I'm fine. Fine. It's been a long day.